My name is John Davis, and I am the National Director of Civil Defense in Washington, D.C. Our purpose in civil defense is to protect you and to help you protect yourself in time of emergency.
I'm Mike Bryant, Director of the Gadsden Etowah County Emergency Management Agency here in Etowah County. We're located in the police building of Gadsden City Hall in downtown Gadsden. Want to talk to you a little bit today about civil defense and how it transpired from civil defense into emergency management.
America is called to arms. In New York, the first volunteers are cheered down Fifth Avenue. And along the piers, an endless chain of these young recruits march into transports, thousands of them and millions more to follow. The German liner Fatherland is seized and her decks jammed with khaki-clad warriors bound for the battlefields of France. The first wave of Americans.
In 1917, war was declared by Congress and all state governors were requested to establish a Council of Defense. The Office of Civil Defense was not established until May of 1941. That was to provide protection for the civilian population in war emergencies. By November 1941, over 1 million volunteers had been trained.
As America looks to its defenses, New York City's civil defense program gets underway. Volunteers recruited for the Medical Emergency Division assemble to take the oath of loyalty from Secretary of Defense George Marshall. These first 700 civil defense aides, after thorough training, will work with New York's police and fire departments and will be ready for any emergency. Secretary Marshall says that New York will serve as a model for other cities in developing the nation's volunteer defense program. 1 million out of the city's 8 million people are expected to volunteer for duty as our country seeks 20 million Americans to man its civil defenses.
In 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and again increased the need and importance of civil defense. It was during this time that the need for a national shelter plan and warning system was recognized.
The bomb was aimed to explode above 0 point, a spot in the city at the junction of the Motoyisu and Ota rivers. The bomb was intentionally set to explode well above the 0 point to dissipate its radioactivity. Here is the pictorial record of the result. At 0 point, directly beneath the explosion, the soldier in the scene is pointing at the spot from which all damage to the surrounding area was measured in terms of distance from the center of the blast. Within a mile of 0 point, the devastation speaks for itself. But in these very ruins, Army cameramen have found and filmed pictorial evidence that tells in twisted steel and stone the effect of death-dealing atomic power.
I've been around for it all. In the late 40s, when I was in middle school, the nation itself, after World War II ended, they were really concerned about public safety in regard to nuclear weapons, basically. And so they started a program that was called Civil Defense. And it went all the way through the 60s until the end of the Cold War. But Civil Defense was basically a program by the government geared toward protection of people from military attack. They came out with various programs where they did cartoons, they did comic books, they did programs in the schools was called duck and cover, where they would sound the alarm and every student would grab their stuff and get under their desk.
There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He'd duck and cover, duck and cover.
He did what we all must learn to do. You
and you
and you
and you, duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. Hey, Bert, come on out and meet all these nice people, please. Oh, all right. We really can't blame you. You see, Bert is a very, very careful fellow. When there's danger, this is the way he keeps from being hurt. Sometimes it even saves his life. That's why these children are practicing to duck and cover just as you do in your school. We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready for it, just as we are ready for many other dangers that are around us all the time.
In reality, during the times, they didn't fully understand what public protection was. In a nuclear attack, getting under your desk would have really had no effect to amount to anything. But it was a program that was in its infancy, and they were just learning how to try to protect the people during a military attack. And they developed fallout shelters all around the country. We still have one here located in Gadsden. It's in the old federal building. And it still has the signs erected where it's a public fallout shelter. We use it for weather now, but at the time it was a big deal. We always used to talk about, and we're taught in school, about the fact that if you heard the air raid sirens, as they were called back then, everyone should go to their fallout shelter. And it was a great fear back in the 50s and even into the early 60s. When the Cold War was at its height.
If shelters are to render maximum service, the contamination brought into them must be kept as low as possible. Shelter occupants who come before the fallout arrives naturally need no monitoring or decontamination. But a shelter occupant arriving after the fallout begins, or returning from an outside mission, as is this man, should be monitored and decontaminated if necessary before entering the building's shelter area. If the outside dose rates are high, or the influx of people is great, it's important to get them inside as quickly as possible. But wherever practical, the decontamination should begin outside the building, with a shaking or brushing of the clothing and a brushing of the shoes. Some of the contamination at least is removed this way, before it can be brought inside.
Everybody feared a nuclear attack. Not many people fully understood the effects of what a nuclear attack would be. But we had in place at that time what is called mutual destruction, where we knew that if the USSR attacked us, in the course of their attack, we would launch our attack, and in effect, both countries would be destroyed, and that was a deterrent toward each country actually attacking the other country. It worked well. The deterrent worked well because the consequences were so great that people just couldn't conceive of any one country actually initiating an attack on another with nuclear weapons. As I said, the general public really didn't have a good understanding of how destructive nuclear weapons were. You could explain it to them, but it was so destructive that they just really couldn't comprehend the fact that there really wouldn't be anything left once a nuclear attack occurred.
By 1951, civil defense involved millions of Americans in the fields of amateur radio operations, civil air patrols, civil messengers, national feeding plans during emergencies, mass evacuation plans, public sheltering, education, and mass casualties, to name a few. Training of volunteers in these fields were of a great importance and continued through the years and is still being done today. In 1958, public law provided funding to the states for these programs. In 1964, the Great Alaskan Earthquake put all these programs to the test. All programs were used with the exception of radiological defense.
All the clocks have stopped at 5:36. And so has everything else. Alaska's been hit by a natural force equal to 10 million atomic bombs of the size that leveled Hiroshima. The greatest shock to hit this continent within the 20th century. And this was Seward, the morning after. After shock came fire and 6 tidal waves. In one smashing blow, 115 lives have been lost. Damage has exceeded 500 million. Whole cities lie helpless without power, heat, light, or water. But already Alaskans are rallying. State and local officials, public welfare workers, hundreds of volunteers. On the local level, too, men like Douglas Clure, the Anchorage Civil Defense Director, are working desperately to meet 100 pressing problems. Organizing rescue teams to search the ruins, the evacuation of victims, establishing emergency communications, restoring essential utilities. Thousands are homeless, in immediate need of welfare services, of food and clothing, in emergency shelter. But public welfare, Red Cross and Salvation Army, civic and church groups, all combine to meet the need.
After the Cold War ended, of course, we had a much better knowledge of what was needed as far as public safety, and we moved into the planning stages for doing public safety in regard to all hazards. And the EMAs were established. Instead of civil defense agencies, we became emergency management agencies. And that was to where we could manage all hazard events as they occurred in each locality. There's 67 counties in the state of Alabama, and each county is required by law to have a viable emergency management agency to help protect the lives and property of citizens within their county. And of course, we have the Alabama Emergency Management Agency, which is located in Clanton. And they serve as a coordinating agency for all the local emergency management agencies. And we have a really, really good partnership with the AEMA.
Here is the National Weather Service with the latest report.
It is a funnel cloud. It looks to be about 200 feet off. No, now it is touching the ground.
What is it doing now?
Heading directly toward Hamilton County.
This time we have tornado side of the city and through the northwest side of the city.
Any casualties with one on Governor's Drive yet?
Not any so far, no. Seem to be following the easterly path toward
Parkway City Shopping Center. It's on the ground all the way?
Still on the ground.
Dispatch somebody to the hospital.
Get Colonel Dindy on the phone.
How many injuries?
Get the National Guard out.
The early years of civil defense concentrated on wartime emergencies, but later included all disasters that may affect the civilian population. Through the years, the name civil defense became emergency management, and in recent years came under the management of the Department of Homeland Security, which provided funding for community emergency response teams, better known as CERT, and the nation again focused on civilian preparedness and response.
Our primary response now is all hazards. Once the CSEP program, which is the Chemical Stockpile Emergency Preparedness Program, that we have been in here since the mid-90s, after Congress mandated that all the facilities around the United States had to dispose of all their chemical weapons of mass destruction. We had a facility located in Calhoun County at the Anderson Army Depot, where we housed GB, VX, mustard gas, in various types of weaponry. All that had to be destroyed. It's taken from about 1994 until this year in September. That program was ended here in this area. All the chemical weapons of mass destruction were properly disposed of, and I might add, were safely disposed of. Over that period of time at the incinerator, not one accident ever occurred that caused human injury. That had Westinghouse was the prime contractor. They did an excellent job in disposing of these weapons. And that no longer poses a risk here in Etowah County, or the 6 surrounding counties made up of what we call the CSEP footprint.
The Chemical Stockpile Emergency Preparedness Program, or CSEP, uses a variety of warning devices to alert and notify the public in a rapid manner. A siren, or a total alert signal, is meant to grab your attention. You should listen to the warning message and take immediate action.
In 2003, wartime chemicals stored in Anniston, Alabama were set to be destroyed. The destruction of the chemicals posed a possible threat to the community. Through the Chemical Stockpile Emergency Preparedness Program, local agencies were provided funding and training as well as equipment to address this threat. CSEP has allowed Alabama counties to update emergency plans, equipment, and facilities, and to train first responders and civilians in preparedness for all hazards and disasters.
This family may never have to deal with an emergency from an accidental or intentional release of chemical agents, but they are well prepared because they have all rehearsed their emergency plan. Being prepared is an important first step in protecting you and your family.
As a local EMA, we